Welcome to another episode on GitHub Copilot. Today, we will be using Copilot as a learning assistant. Copilot can help you deepen your expertise in any specific topic. In this session, we will explore how to make API calls in JavaScript with the help of Copilot's guidance. This workflow is just one example. You can apply a similar approach to learn any new technology. So let us see how Copilot can help me understand how I can use different methods or approaches for API calls implementation in JavaScript. Let's start with the first question on understanding the different options for API invocation in JavaScript. So I'm asking to give different options so that I can go a little deeper to understand each of the things based on the pros and cons. As you can observe that Copilot came with the different approaches, starting with the XML HTTP request. It is a widely adopted technology for earlier browser-based applications. Then Fetch API, Axios, jQuery.ajax, SuperAgent, Node.js, HTTP, GraphQL. There are different methods which I can use for processing APIs from JavaScript. I got a fair understanding on what exactly each of these technologies and what's the pros and cons associated with the technologies. Let me ask Copilot to give me a little more detail in terms of providing the sample implementations, which will help me to understand how difficult it will be to implement each of these approaches. The first one is XML HTTP request. Copilot provided a sample code how I can get the details or process an API. Once the response comes, how to take care of the response. Similarly, Copilot provided the sample code for Fetch, Axios, jQuery, SuperAgent, Node.js, GraphQL. So detailed information is provided here. Now, if I want to look at any specific area, I can go ahead and look at each of these areas. Instead of that, a proper comparison, I am asking Copilot to give me the comparison in a tabular format so that it's more visible for me to understand the pros and cons of each of the options, and I can come up with a strategy to implement the API invocation in my particular code base. So as you can observe that Copilot came up with a detailed comparison in terms of pros and cons, the description, methods and everything. If you feel this is not exactly you want some more parameters as part of the comparison, you can rephrase your prompt specifying that provide tabular comparison between these options by comparing different metrics like the security, browser support, accessibility parameters, etc. You can specify your own parameter and ask Copilot to come up with a comparison across these different approaches. Based on that, you can take a decision on how to implement these APIs as part of your JavaScript application. As you can observe, it's given security, browser support, ease of use, error handling, JSON handling, asynchronous streaming, library size, interceptors, Node.js, everything. So if you are specific to, I need a highly secure implementation, looks like almost the first 3-4 elements support the same origin policy and course, and depends on implementation. HTTP and GraphQL also support the security aspect, and the browser support also. If you are targeting all browsers, then maybe Fetch and Axios will not work. That's work only on the modern. So in case you are looking for all browser support, XML HTTP, which support the legacy browsers, and jQuery also. If it is the ease of use, the modern fetch, SEOs, and GraphQL provide the ease of use, quick implementation aspects. So based on each of these parameters, we can compare the API implementation approach and take a decision which one is more appropriate. But when we implement an application targeting a specific domain, something like e-commerce or government sector or healthcare, we may have specific options which API handling is better to use, especially dealing with the PI data or data privacy involved. So I can ask Copilot to suggest which one is the better approach in my e-commerce application which deals with the personally identifiable information. Copilot suggested Axios is the best one if you are dealing with the personal identifiable information, and considering the security and ease of use, Axios is the recommended approach. And it's specified the pros in terms of security, error handling and everything, and the cons. It's an external library and add some overall size to your application. It looks fine for me considering the pros. The cons looks okay, and it's provided an sample implementation as well. Now, as I learned about different methodologies to access an API from JavaScript, a comparison is done, and I requested Copilot to suggest me the API strategy based on my domain, e-commerce and the PI data processing. Everything is done. Sometimes we may think what else, where I need to focus, what else I need to study. For getting that next level, a follow-up question or suggestion from Copilot, okay, you learned these aspects or you are asking me these suggestions, you may be interested in these areas. You can set that as part of your settings. So let me go ahead and do a settings under Copilot. Go down, you have a setting for, there are multiple options right now. There is a follow-up settings. If you look at GitHub Copilot chat, if you want to have a follow-up from Copilot, you can set it as always, indicating that whenever I use Copilot for any kind of suggestion, let Copilot come up with a follow-up question or suggestion back to me. So let me ask this next question on debugging area. How can I debug this implementation? That is what I'm looking at. I'm decided to go with a specific approach. Now I want to know how I can debug my API integration. Copilot suggested some of the elements like the console logging, the basic implementation, or browser developer tools. Axios have a debug library. I can use that for debugging information. With the event configuration driven debugging is possible with the Axios debug, or give a breakpoints and do it, and proper error handling is also helpful for debugging. And as you can observe that Copilot provided follow-up question or follow-up area which can help me to deep dive, knows more about the existing suggestions or my learning path altogether. Copilot given this suggestion, tools to enhance debugging further. Let me just take that one to understand a little further on the debugging. As you can observe, Copilot is coming up with suggestions on various tools which can be used for debugging. Instead of the previous question where it's given the different debugging methodologies, here it's giving debugging tools. Start with the Postman, Fiddler, Proxy, VS Code debugger. There are a bunch of debugging tools. And it's given again a follow-up question on what tool should I start with. So I am okay with the debugging tools. Let me just ask Copilot what additional factors I need to consider when I go with a Axios based API processing. Because Axios is the one Copilot recommended for me in my e-commerce application and the PI data. So I need a little more further information on what kind of considerations I need to do it. It's given the security, error handling, performance, scalability, different NFR areas which I needs to be taken care as part of my entire deployment. And it's again given a best practices for security. So if I want to know further on security aspects, I can ask this one. Or I can ask a different question altogether. Like now, I need to know more about documentation. So let me see how Copilot is able to help me specific to Axios-based API integration documentation. Inline comments provide more readability aspect. JSDoc is another one where you can add the docs on top of each of the public functions, and using tools to get an API documentation and README file is obviously one of the things we use at an repository level. Code examples, API blueprint. These are the recommendation came from Copilot. Now Copilot provided another suggestion on tools are best for documentation. Let me just ask that question also. So we started with different options for the API integration in a JavaScript, learned about that and learned about sample implementation. Looking at the sample implementation, I understand the complexity aspect, and Copilot provided a tabular comparison between the options. First the basic one and based on my matrices. Once I understand different approaches, the comparison aspect, I asked Copilot to recommend me the best option for my domain, the e-commerce application development, and where the PI data handling is there. Copilot recommended the Axios. Then I went a little deeper on Axios based debugging aspects, parameters defined or the factors I need to consider when I go with an Axios based API implementation in terms of NFRs like security, performance and everything. Then went a detail into the documentation and the tools used for documentation of my implementation. It's provided Swagger, Postman and different tools which I can go through and understand which one is better. Or even I can ask further to Copilot which tool is fits better for my project. I can just ask this way, which tool fits our project best, or I can specify that which tool is fit best for my e-commerce PI data handling project. Which tool fits our e-commerce PI data handling website development. Provide the comparison in a tabular model for easy understanding. So let us see how Copilot suggests which of the tool fit for my specific data handling and a comparison in a tabular format. And it's coming up with a detailed comparison. Remember, we specified only the tool. We didn't specify whether it's a debugging tool or documentation tool. But based on the previous conversation, context awareness, Copilot understand that I am talking about the documentation tool, not a debugging or any other tools. And it came with a proper comparison on each of the tools recommended and comparison in terms of various parameters. Based on this comparison, Copilot even recommended me Swagger or OpenAPI with Swagger UI is the best fit for your e-commerce application which handle PII data. So this is how you can drill down on a specific technical area and learn more about that one. Use Copilot as your learning assistant. Explore new technologies quickly and expertise. Thank you.